A boy heard a strange sound while playing, so he hurried back to the car and told his father about it. His father thought it was just the sound from their work, so he told him not to leave the car. After saying that, he went back to work. It turned out that the man's job was producing illegal substances in an abandoned mine. As they were about to leave, they heard a strange sound coming from the mine. The two followed the sound to investigate, but they only heard it getting closer and closer. At that moment, a monster suddenly appeared and attacked them. Right after that, the screams of the two echoed through the cave. Since his father had not come out, the boy stepped inside alone, switching to another scene. The female lead, Julia, is a teacher, and her student Lucas is our main protagonist. Julia noticed that Lucas had been acting strange lately because every time he came to class, he would draw. Perhaps because Lucas had a rather shy personality, Julia didn't think much of it. After school, when Lucas was on his way home, he discovered a small animal by the roadside. Strangely, he picked up a rock from the ground. Then he brought the animal's body home. When he arrived home, he first listened to a strange room. Hearing no sound, he then stepped inside. At night, Lucas held a picture of a family of 4 and looked at it. But suddenly, a growl came from behind that door. Moreover, someone inside was frantically banging on the door. The next day, since Julia knew that Lucas had been drawing recently, she asked him to tell the story in his picture. Lucas said that there used to be 3 bears. They were the big bear, the small bear, and the baby bear. The big bear usually took care of the 2 small bears, but one day, the big bear got sick. When the baby bear came home, it found that the big bear and the small bear seemed to have become different beings. Because they had no meat to eat, they became increasingly irritable. Julia was shocked after hearing this. How could a child tell such a story? After school, the school bully found that someone had played a prank on his bag. He turned around, saw Lucas, and thought he was the culprit, then slammed Lucas against the door. Fortunately, Julia arrived just in time. Thanks to that, the boy was not hurt any further. After that, Julia looked up information about Lucas. It turned out that his mother had passed away. Immediately after, Julia called his father, but there was no answer on the other end of the line. Moreover, there was a man frantically banging on the door. If nothing unexpected happened, that man was Lucas's father. Waiting until school was over, Julia followed Lucas. Lucas stopped at an ice cream shop. Julia took the opportunity to invite him inside for a treat. She did this to talk to Lucas about his family. During their conversation, she learned that Lucas had a younger brother. His brother no longer went to school and stayed home all day with their father. When Julia asked about his father, Lucas refused to answer, then he stood up and left. At this point, you have probably figured it out. The story Lucas told earlier was actually about his own family, and the boy from the beginning of the film was Lucas's younger brother. As for why his father was still alive, let's keep watching. Because Julia still found everything suspicious, she drove straight to Lucas's house. When she arrived, she knocked on the front door, but no one answered. However, shortly after, the door suddenly opened by itself. Before Julia could step inside, a loud crashing noise erupted from within. Terrified, she quickly drove away. That night, Julia recalled Lucas's story. Suddenly, her police officer brother Paul appeared. Julia then asked Paul about Lucas's father. It turned out that Paul had known about him for a long time because he was a drug addict. Paul had encountered him multiple times before. However, they had always let him go since there was no one else to take care of the children. Julia also mentioned that she had been to the boy's house and heard strange noises. Paul was furious after hearing this because it was too dangerous for Julia to go alone. The scene shifts. Lucas seemed to be preparing some food. Right after, he carried the food up to the attic. As soon as he placed it down, a monster suddenly crawled out. The monster did not attack him but instead began devouring the raw meat on the plate. If nothing was out of the ordinary, this creature was Lucas's father. After his father had eaten his fill, Lucas's younger brother crawled out as well. Lucas had also prepared some snacks for him. After finishing everything, he locked the door as usual. The next day, he set up animal traps outside. But a sudden noise startled him, so he rushed over to check. There, he saw a man discovering a corpse. The man stood frozen for a moment before leaving the area. Meanwhile, Julia was examining Lucas's desk. She showed his drawing to the school principal. Julia believed that Lucas was able to draw such a picture because he had been abused. The principal was in disbelief after hearing this. She told Julia that when she had time, she would definitely visit Lucas's home. Later, Julia saw Paul after his shift, so she asked him what had happened. Paul said that a police chief had discovered part of a human corpse in the forest. The other half of the body was found in the coal mine. At first, they assumed the person had been mauled by a large animal. After saying that, Paul left to find the forensic examiner. The police chief they mentioned was the man Lucas had seen earlier, and that corpse was likely one of his father's colleagues. That night, Lucas once again brought snacks for his younger brother. But just after eating, his brother suddenly coughed up blood. Terrified, Lucas immediately ran outside. His younger brother had likely been infected by their father and could no longer eat normal food. Meanwhile, Paul also discovered something unusual. The forensic examiner believed the victim had been killed by an animal. However, the type of animal was something the examiner had never seen before. Even stranger, there were human bite marks on the corpse's arm. After hearing this, Paul felt completely powerless. He had no idea what kind of case this was. The scene shifts to the school principal. She had gone directly to Lucas's house. Like Julia, she knocked on the door first. Seeing no response, the principal pushed the door open and stepped inside. As soon as she entered, a foul stench hit her nose. She continued further inside and discovered that strange door. Moreover, she could hear the sound of a child crying from within. Driven by curiosity, the principal opened the door. Inside, she saw Lucas's younger brother. As she stepped forward to comfort him, Lucas's father suddenly appeared. He grabbed her and violently threw her aside. Immediately after, the creature bit into the principal's neck. Once she stopped breathing, the monster began devouring her body. Before long, something strange happened. The creature's body started twisting and contorting uncontrollably. In the end, a pair of antlers suddenly emerged from its mouth. Meanwhile, Paul and his team had arrived at the mine. Some officers discovered something unusual on the ground. Paul assumed it was just a deer antler. However, the police chief said otherwise. He claimed he had never seen anything like it before. Since they couldn't find any other clues, they had no choice but to leave the mine. The scene shifts to Lucas. He was stopped by the school bully on his way home. Lucas didn't want to engage and turned to walk away. But at that moment, a monster suddenly appeared and locked eyes on them. Seeing this, Lucas immediately ran away. In the end, the monster went after the school bully instead. Lucas sprinted straight home. When he arrived, he noticed a strange car parked outside. This immediately made him feel that something was wrong. He rushed upstairs and was shocked by the sight before him. Lucas went downstairs and saw the hallway covered in bloodstains. Moreover, his father had taken his younger brother and left the house. Lucas was smart. He quickly covered the strange car with a cloth to avoid suspicion. Then he cleaned up the bloodstains inside the house. Meanwhile, Paul asked Julia if she had seen the principal recently. Upon hearing that the principal had gone missing, Julia immediately remembered that she had sent her to Lucas's house. Paul, upon learning this, rushed over. When the two arrived, they were immediately hit by the stench of decay, but no one answered the door. Lucas knew his father had done something terrible, so he hid inside the house. Without a search warrant, Paul and his colleagues had no choice but to leave. The next day, the school bully's mother also reported her son missing. With the recent string of disappearances, Paul felt that the cases were too much of a coincidence. Julia, however, was not happy to hear it was just a coincidence. She was convinced that all these cases were connected. Julia then drove to Lucas's house. Upon arrival, she spotted a suspicious vehicle. She opened it and found that it was indeed the principal's car. Paul arrived and soon after discovered the principal's corpse. Near the body, there was also a layer of human skin. After examining the bite marks on the principal's body, they confirmed that the owner of the shed skin was none other than Lucas's father. After school, Julia took Lucas to the hospital. After a medical examination, the doctor diagnosed Lucas with mild psychosis. Furthermore, they discovered that he had been abused. Julia felt deeply unsettled by this. She wanted to adopt Lucas, but her brother strongly opposed it. The two got into a heated argument over the matter. The scene shifts to Lucas, who had fallen asleep and started dreaming. It turned out that after his father returned from the mine, he had been infected by some kind of virus. At first, his father still had some awareness. Fearing that he might lose control, he locked himself behind multiple locks. He instructed Lucas to lock him inside and not to open the door under any circumstances. His father forbade him from opening the door, but one day, Lucas did. By then, his father had lost all rationality and immediately grabbed his younger brother. The next day, Paul took Julia to see the police chief. Julia first showed him Lucas's drawing. After looking at it, the police chief took out a book from his office. It contained an illustration of the antlers they had found in the mine. He believed that the creature from the mine was the same as the one depicted in the book. This being was called the Wendigo, the flesh-eating demon. Furthermore, its nature was like an endless void. It would always be searching for new victims. Paul found this laughable. He dismissed it as mere mythology. The police chief went on to say that in order to kill this creature, one must destroy its heart. Only then would it begin searching for a new host. After gathering this information, the two left. Shortly after, Paul received a call from a colleague reporting the discovery of another corpse. From what his colleague described, the body belonged to the school bully. The forensic examiner added that the child had been bitten in half. Despite this, Paul still refused to believe in the existence of the creature. Julia was shocked after hearing this. She turned to Paul and asked him to take her to the hospital. Shortly after, Julia took Lucas home. Paul, worried for Julia's safety, asked his colleagues to patrol near her house. Meanwhile, Julia, inside the house, told Lucas that his father was dead. But Lucas said his father was not dead, that he had been reborn. Moreover, he was with his younger brother. Lucas also said that his father would come for him and take him to the mine. At that moment, strange noises echoed from outside. The officers outside also noticed something unusual and quickly called Paul. He suspected that something was inside the storage shed, so he cautiously approached it. Seeing this, Julia quickly took Lucas and hid. The man entered the house and saw a child, but then, a monster suddenly appeared. It directly pierced the man's body with its leg. The man stopped breathing instantly. Before long, Paul arrived in a hurry. Meanwhile, Lucas, taking advantage of Julia's distraction, ran outside alone. As soon as Paul entered, he saw his colleague's corpse. When he turned and saw the child, the monster appeared again and flung Paul away. The child, as if responding to a call from its father, stood up and began moving. Paul tried to call for backup, but his radio was broken. Hearing nothing, he assumed the monster had left. But it suddenly appeared again. Luckily, the attack was not fatal. Paul grabbed his weapon and started fighting back. In pain, the monster released him. Seeing Paul still breathing, the monster went for the final strike. After that, it turned and left. Julia, hearing no more sounds, stepped outside. She soon found her brother. She quickly gave Paul some first aid. Then, she told him she had to go to the mine to find Lucas. Hearing this, Paul decided to go with her. When they arrived, Julia called for an ambulance as Paul had lost consciousness. She then entered the mine alone. As soon as she stepped inside, she found the two brothers. But when she looked to the side, she saw the monster gnawing on an animal carcass. The monster turned and noticed Julia. She saw that on its head was a layer of human facial skin. Terrified, Julia fired her gun at the creature, but with a single swipe, the monster knocked the gun away. As she went to retrieve it, the monster suddenly appeared behind her. With another swipe, it caused Julia to fall down. She crawled to the side and lit a flare. The monster seemed to fear the light and dared not approach. Immediately, Julia grabbed a metal rod and stabbed the creature. After all, its weak point was the heart. But no matter how she attacked, the monster seemed unharmed. Just as it was about to strike her, Lucas stabbed it in the heart with a knife. The monster collapsed, motionless. Julia knew it wouldn't die so easily. She cut open its body and removed its heart. Before they could celebrate, they realized the monster had transferred itself into the younger brother. Julia then raised the knife and approached the child. Lucas saw this and panicked. He believed his brother was only sick. After Julia's persuasion, he finally stepped aside. In the end, Julia had no choice but to end the child's life. The scene shifts. A group of people was playing by the river. As they were about to leave, Paul suddenly coughed. Looking down, he saw that he had vomited black blood, and with that the movie came to an end. What do you think about the character Lucas? In my personal opinion, I think Lucas is a truly successful character. Even though he is just a child, he is really brave. Although his father and younger brother were infected, he didn't abandon them. In the end, he still tried his best to protect his younger brother. Despite losing all his family members, Lucas deserves a better life. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the latest videos.